a technology that was pioneered by a man named Marshall Rosenberg, Dr. Marshall Rosenberg, who's no longer with us. He died maybe 10 years ago or so. He would have been around 80 at the time. And this is something he started doing probably 40 years ago, maybe more. And he did it out of his own need. He realized that he didn't have the tools to communicate with people as effectively as he wanted to. He was a psychologist, and he wanted to find a better way. And so one of the most significant impacts, I think I mentioned to you, some of you before, for me at least, with this technology, is being reminded that I'm responsible for my own feelings. And this is something people constantly put on other people. You make me angry, right? So NVC starts with the realization that there are ways to communicate which blame other people and make them responsible, and there are ways to communicate that own responsibility. And so there's specific ways of languaging things, which for some people feel a bit stilted at first. You know, who wants to use a formula, right? Although sometimes the formula is a really great way to do something until you have it down. Once you own it, you don't necessarily need to be so formulaic. But sometimes initially, it's a great way to start. And so with NVC, there's basically, I think, 4 parts to stating what's going on for you. In the first part, the first thing you have to do is you have to notice what's happening. What is it that preceded your feeling the way that you're feeling? Okay? So let's say we're talking about a negative emotion. I'm angry. So the question is, what was it that triggered anger? And understand that triggering is different than being responsible for. Okay? What triggered the anger? Well, maybe you said something that triggered this anger. Okay? You have to understand that's what happened, because in order to communicate it appropriately, you have to know that. So you could then say, when you said what you did, I felt angry, and here's the part that's different. In most cases, most of the time, what most people would do is they would say, because you said this, because you did that, because you looked at me that way, whatever. And with NVC, what you say is, I felt angry because I, taking responsibility, because I have a need for respect, for instance, okay? So you said something that I felt was disrespectful, I believed was disrespectful, and you say, when you said what you said, I felt angry because I have a need for disrespect. Okay, so now you've laid out what's happened. The next step is to then make a request. And so this you may have to think about this. What can you ask the other person to do differently in a way that they can actually agree to it? So there are some guidelines for NVC-worthy requests. You can't say, would you always be nice to me? And that doesn't work for a couple reasons. One, because being nice to me isn't something that an observer could necessarily observe. Some people would think that what they already did was being nice, and other people would say no. So it has to be something that is objective, that anyone could objectively say, yes, this happened, no, this didn't happen. Okay? So being nice to me doesn't qualify. Whereas, you know, when in the future, when you know, for the next week, would you be willing to not curse at me? Right? That's objective. Right? We can see if that happened or didn't happen. And the second part I threw in without telling you what the guideline was, right? Did anyone notice the difference? Would you always be nice to me, or for the next week, would you be willing to do this? What's the difference?
Time frame.
Time. Can anybody here honestly agree to do anything forever? No. That's absurd, right? So NVC requests have to be bound by time. You have to say something along the lines of, you know, would you be willing to do it this or do it this way for the next 2 weeks, or for the, whatever, something, and it has to be something that's objectively verifiable, okay? Now, NVC starts with the premise that we want to contribute to each other's lives. Do you want to contribute to the people that you care about? What do you think? Yeah? We do, don't we? But nobody wants that to be demanded of them, right? And what's interesting is that NVC says that sometimes what looks like a request is actually a demand. How do we know? How can you tell the difference? Now, demands are obvious sometimes. Sometimes it's easy, right? Get over here. That's a demand. Where a request would be, would you please come here? But what sounds like a request could still be a demand, according to Rosenberg. And how you can tell is when they respond negatively. So if it's a real request, and I ask whatever it is, and you say no, I should be okay with that. If I'm asking a request, I understand that you have the right to say no. If I'm not okay with your no, it was actually a veiled demand. Okay, if the only acceptable answer is yes, then it's a demand, not a request. Okay? Everyone clear about this? Does this make sense so far?
We just talk about that a veiled no or yes. I lost it right there at that very
Yeah,
end.
so again, if I make a request and you say yes, we'll never know if it was really a request or a demand. But if you say no, and I'm not okay with that, then it wasn't really a request. It was really a demand. When it's a request, any answer should be okay.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay? If you're requesting something, you have to understand that the other party has the right to say yes or no, or whatever they want. Right? If only one answer is acceptable, it wasn't really a request. You might have framed it like it was a request, but it wasn't really. And that's important to understand. Okay? One of the hardest parts of this for most people is needs. We talked about this before, right? Understanding that if you don't make me angry, what does? Anyone remember?
Yourselves.
I get angry because I have unmet needs. Unmet needs. When our needs aren't met, there's going to be negative emotions. When our needs are met, there's going to be positive emotions. Okay? So I have unmet social needs, and I'm feeling lonely, I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling whatever it might be, right? Okay, I have those emotions because I have a need that's not being met, right? Remember, needs are always universal. So if I said to you, I need you to spend some time with me, that's not true. That's just not true, okay? I might want to spend some time with you, but spending time with you is a specific strategy to get a need met. It's not a need, okay? If I have social needs, then a lot of people could meet those needs. And if there's no one here, I could get on Skype or I could call someone, right, and connect with someone that way. Does this make sense to everyone? So it's important because when you're stating needs, see, for this to work, it has to be done correctly. If you're saying to someone, when you said what you said, I felt angry because I have a need for this. I have a need for you to do this. That's not a need. And they're not going to really resonate with what you're saying because it's not accurately stated. Everyone gets that that's not really a need. That's not something you need. That's something you want. It's a strategy to meet your need. Okay? So you want to state your needs first, and then you can make a request, which is an intent to get the need met. Your request is a strategy to meet your need. Okay? That's what requests are. That's what they should be. All right?
Should always be a request, not a demand.
Always should be a request, not a demand. Now, this is tricky. Even if you're doing this perfectly and you're making requests, people will often hear something different. Why? Why do you think that happens? Rosenberg talked about people listening with giraffe ears, Giraffe ears? Well, giraffes have the biggest heart of any land animal. Okay, if your head was, 2 stories above the ground, you'd have a big heart too, to get the blood up there. So giraffes have a large heart, and what we want to do is we want to be communicating from the heart. So he says, even if you're stating this in giraffe language from the heart, people might be hearing it with jackal ears. Okay? Why do you think that happens? Why do people hear maybe like you're making them responsible, you're blaming them? Why do they, if you're not saying that, why do they hear that?
Because they have their own needs that are not being met or not.
Maybe they have some needs that aren't being met. Everyone does. What else?
They're not listening properly.
They're not listening properly. Okay. Do you think maybe they're listening through pre-existing filters and expectations? What's their experience been so far in their life? Other people blame them for how they feel. So no matter how you state it, they may hear that. Does that make sense to everyone? Even if you're not saying that, that may be what they're hearing. So if that happens, what you can do is you can say something like, I apologize, I don't think I communicated that very clearly. Can I try again? And then you say it again, and you make sure that maybe you actually stated it incorrectly, right? You wanted to do it, but maybe you missed something. Each component has to be in place. Okay, if you state, if you don't include the need that's not being met, they're going to feel blamed. So even though you say because I, right? Well, that's the need. And if you just say, when you did this, I felt angry, that sounds like you're blaming them. So you have to follow up by saying, because I have this need, right? And that may or may not instantly make it clear to them that you're not blaming them, especially when they're used to being blamed, used to hearing blame all the time. So sometimes you have to try several times, okay? It's also important that we differentiate what real feelings are. We get clear about feelings. Because a lot of times, in fact, this happened, I can't remember where this happened, I think it might have been, I don't remember if this was yesterday at the lecture or last night I think it might have been last night at the meditation discussion. Someone said, I feel, for instance, I feel that that's an inappropriate use of that word. I got news for you, folks. That ain't a feeling. People use the word feel when they really should be using the word think, believe. And that confuses the matter, right? Hopefully everyone understands, as I said the other day, all feelings are legitimate. They arise naturally and spontaneously. They're all healthy, they're all natural, right? But if we're using the word feel and we're following by something that's not a feeling, it legitimizes something. It leaves it beyond reproach, where we could say, well, but that's my thought, and I can change that if we understand it's a thought, okay? So feelings, what are feelings? We use the word feeling, what are we talking about?
Something that
Emotions or?
something that you actually feel in your body, whether it's emotion or something physically that you
That's
feel.
correct. Feelings are either emotions, we feel emotions in the body, or they're physical feelings. I feel cold. That's accurate, okay? I feel like you're not paying attention. That's not a feeling. That's a belief. And it demonstrates another point, important point. Feelings never involve someone else's behavior. Have you ever felt rejected? Are you sure?
Oh, no, yeah, good point.
You see, you believe somebody rejected you. Let me give you a scenario. Let's say you're in high school and you get the sense that the most disgusting person in high school, this person that's just like they've got, their hair's greasy and there's snot running out of their nose and They just, like, they're dirty and they smell bad and, you know, and they speak in a way that's repulsive to you. And you get the feeling that this person is attracted to you. Okay? If later on you believe that person rejected you, how do you feel?
Relieved.
You might feel relieved, you might feel happy, you might feel ecstatic. Being rejected by that person is not a bad thing. So when we say, I feel rejected, it doesn't even tell us anything. Okay, we think rejected, that's bad. It's bad to be rejected. That's a belief. There may be cases where it's good. Okay? How about ignored? Is that a positive thing?
No.
That's negative, right? You ever go to class when you weren't prepared? How did you feel when the teacher ignored you? Relieved? Happy?
Yeah.
Grateful? Right? Ignored isn't a bad thing. It depends on the context. It's not a feeling. You can't feel ignored. You can believe the person's ignoring you, and you might feel happy about it, and you might feel sad about it, depending on the circumstances. So, again, in order to use this technology, you have to use it correctly. Because if you're going around saying, I feel ignored, the other person is going to be confused. First of all, they may believe, like you probably did, that that was a feeling. It's not. Can everyone see it's not a feeling? It's what you believe somebody else is doing. That's not a feeling. What does ignored feel like? When I'm not prepared, it feels really good. Okay? When I'm very attracted to someone, it may not feel very good. It's not a feeling. Okay? Anger always feels like anger. Okay? Ignored, rejected, dismissed, anything that is describing what somebody else is doing or what you think they're doing, not a feeling. It's a belief about their behavior. And you want to be able to differentiate those two things. Otherwise, you're just confusing the matter. Does that make sense to everyone? Is there a question, Karen?
No.
Okay.
No, it's just something, it makes sense, but it's very different, so it's something to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a new language. It's a new way of languaging things. But it's important to do. Now, notice, by the way, this might help you think about this. It's kind of interesting. Because, again, people use the word feel a lot when it's not really appropriate. And if you're following the word feel, if you're talking about something where you have to use feel or think, but you have to say something, like, yeah, it wouldn't make sense if you took the word feel out, right? Then you know it's not really a feeling. Actual emotions and physical feelings don't require the word feel.
I heard.
I'm angry, I'm cold, I ignored. You have to say feel or think. Okay? Whenever it's an emotion or physical feeling, you don't need the word feel. You can use it, but it's completely unnecessary. It's kind of ironic that it's unnecessary.
So
when
it's kind of not even grammatically correct,
No, it's correct to use it.
is it?
Yeah. In the same way that, let me think, in English, in Spanish, for instance, I could say, yo hablo ahorita. I speak now. I could also say hablo ahorita, porque that form of the verb tells you that it's me. So you don't need to say yo, I, but you can. It's not incorrect to say it. Okay? It's making it really, really clear and obvious that that's who's speaking. But it's already clear. In the same way that you don't need the word feel, it's okay to use the word feel with a feeling. You can say I feel cold, or you can say I'm cold. But if it's actually describing someone else's behavior, or it's actually a thought, it doesn't make sense if you take the word feel out, unless you replace it with something else like think or believe. Okay, you can't just remove that word and have it still make sense. There's no way to say that without having one of those words in there. Does that make sense? Everyone clear? Okay, so that can help you. This is going to be a test, and it's practice. It's going to require some practice, right? Speaking of practice, as I said before, for many people, the hardest part of this sometimes is actually getting clear what it is we're feeling, because so many of us aren't so used to it, right? Ask the guys you know, and they'll probably say, good, bad, okay, You know, that's about it. That's all they got. Right? That's all we got. Women tend to be a little bit more literate, but there's a huge range of emotions, and it's useful to use the appropriate word. Now, I don't know if this is true in every other language, so I don't know what it's like in German if you have as many options. I don't know what it's like in Polish. Several years ago, I just completed a seminar in a little town in Denmark, city in Denmark, and I was speaking in this there was a meeting room in like a conscious bookstore. And the bookstore's girlfriend had a restaurant right next door. They opened to each other, a vegetarian restaurant, vegan, I don't remember. But they had raw vegan stuff. And as I walked through to leave, I could see they were setting up for some music, and I thought, you know what? It's like 6 o'clock, I'm hungry, maybe I'll get a salad or something. So I sat down, these two young women came out and they played music. One was a singer-songwriter, and her half-sister was like backing vocals. And she played all these original songs, every one of them in English. And at the first break, I went up to her and said, "Hi, where are you from?" And she said, "Here." And I said, "Oh, I'm just curious, I was surprised that all of your songs were in English." And she said, "Well, I grew up with English. My father's Jamaican, my mother's Danish. I grew up here. I grew up with both languages. There's 3 times as many English words as Danish words. It makes it easier to express myself." Okay? So in English we have an enormous vocabulary, and that makes it possible to talk more specifically, to use words that more specifically describe what we're feeling, right? Because angry and enraged are similar, but they're different. Mad is different, okay? There's gradations there. And so it's useful to use whatever the most appropriate word is, because what we're trying to do is be transparent. This is what's going on for me, right? Now, I notice, a lot of the people we get here are people who would self-describe as being spiritually oriented. And a lot of spiritually oriented people have somehow gotten the notion that it's not okay, it's not spiritual to be mad, to be angry. So you'll hear things like this when they're being honest with each other, being honest with each other. They'll say things like, "Hey, I just wanted to tell you that the other day when you did that, or like when you just said what you said, I feel really angry." And I'm listening going, bullshit, you're not angry. I mean, if you're angry, you're suppressing it, right? It's not useful to do that. You actually want to feel the emotion. So it's okay to let the emotion come into play. It's okay. I remember a guy I met 20 years ago here in Costa Rica. He used to take people out on these dolphin tours in a bay. He'd go out and they'd swim with the dolphins. And he'd have, his tours were typically 2 or 3 days, and people would be on this little boat together for a couple days. And he said, you get that many people together, stuff happens. He said, "I always encourage people to vomit now and clean it up later. Just let it come out, whatever it is, and then you can deal with it. If you keep it suppressed, that's not healthy." Okay?
Sorry, I disagree. So you can suppress it, but you can also feel it, which is not suppression, without the need to manifest it.
Okay,
You can really feel angry,
Okay.
but not create further problems for yourself and others.
I appreciate your sharing. We'll have to agree to disagree. If you're really angry, and you should express that. I mean, it's a powerful emotion. There's no harm in expressing it, okay? If you're not expressing it, I don't think you're actually feeling it. I don't believe you're actually resolving anything. And I believe a lot of people walk around thinking they are, and they're still suppressing stuff. And this will often come out later on. For instance, every serial killer, all their neighbors are like, "Hey, he was such a nice guy." Right? How many times have you ever heard that? This is because they're suppressing a lot of things. And I think it's a mistake to not truly express what's going on for you. If you're really feeling something, it should be evident when you speak it. If you can experience something and there's truly no anger involved, then there's no reason to pretend you're angry or to say you're angry if there's truly no anger. But if there is anger, then I think that that's going to be apparent. So, in any case, you know, it's important here that you are, because again, the whole point is to connect ourselves, right? To better connect with each other. And that means being willing to be fully transparent, to say what's going on for you. This came up in a conversation just the other day. You know, someone having a problem with someone else, but not wanting to speak it. And, you know, here, I mean, if you have a roommate here, chances are good, there's going to be some issues. If you're going to live together for weeks at a time, this stuff's going to come up. I would encourage, if you need me to go and talk to that person, I'll do it. No problem. But I would encourage each of you to deal with it yourself in the best way that you can. Be completely honest, okay? Don't hold back. Be honest. Be as loving and gentle as you can, but feel your emotions and be honest about what's going on for you. This is a great tool because, again, if you're using these simple steps, you can say what you need to say, but take responsibility for how you feel. You're not saying to them, "You're making me angry," but you can say, "Hey, you know, whenever you do that, I feel angry, or I feel frustrated, or I feel whatever, you know, whatever the truth is." Okay, and just doing this piece, right? So, and getting in touch with those emotions is a really powerful thing. Remember that I believe that the most important thing you can do to create emotional poise for yourself is to get into the habit of experiencing your emotions as they come up, experiencing them completely, okay? And so what you might want to be doing as you go through your day today is every so often, it could be once an hour, you know, if you have your phone in your pocket, you could set it to vibrate once an hour, and that could remind you, A, to breathe, you know, but B, to check in. What am I feeling right now? Okay? And then if you notice you're feeling some strong emotion, see if there's something going on in your world right now, in your room right now, or whatever, in your space, or if maybe this is something coming up from your past. Okay? It's not always easy to differentiate, but it's always important to differentiate. All right? The goal of this is to be able to experience every emotion as it arises. And one of the other books I used to teach, along with nonviolent communication, I taught radical honesty and the 4 agreements. And people would say, "But where's the books on nutrition and fasting?" I'm like, no, that's all coming from here. I don't need books for that. Okay? These, because if we want to be healthy, the hardest thing for most people is emotions and communication, interactions with other human beings. And that's what these books are expert on. Radical honesty would say you want to always, eventually, we get to the highest level of honesty. That's when in every single moment we're willing to say whatever's real for us in that moment, including, "I'm incredibly angry with you right now. I still love you, but I want to kill you." Okay? If that's what's true. Okay, I'm not going to do it, but I'm going to go think about it. Feelings. If we can find the books, we have 2. Does anyone have a copy of Nonviolent Communication? You have one? Okay. You have another one. Okay. There might only be 2 copies on the shelf.
There were 3 there when I took mine.
There were 3. So there should be another one here around somewhere. And it may actually be on the shelf. I may have missed it. But take a look at it. Towards the back of the book somewhere, you can look in the index. There's an inventory of feeling words. And it might be really useful just to go through that and take a look and see. There may be things that you may be feeling and not even like recognizing that's what you're feeling sometimes. Okay? By the way, this technology, this languaging has been used all over the world. What Rosenberg did while he was alive is he would go, for instance, he talked about a meeting in Africa somewhere, in a country where,
Algeria.
I don't remember where it was.
Algeria.
Was it Nigeria?
Yeah.
Okay. Algeria. Okay. So he had like 8 kings. You know, they have their own little kingdoms, or chiefs, sitting around a table, and everyone there had one or more of their children, their sons, murdered by somebody else there. Imagine the environment, okay? I think it might have even been more than 8, but you've got all these chiefs, and all of them have had someone in their family murdered by someone else sitting at the table, every one of them. And what he's able to do, what Rosenberg was able to accomplish by using this language, was to create peaceful communications. He actually ended the strife there, okay, by getting people to communicate using this language. Now, in order for that to happen, what he would say is, I think within 15 or maybe 20 minutes of getting the other party to be able to correctly state what's going on for you, he can create peace. What he would do in his workshops was amazing. He would ask for the oldest grudge. So you'd have couples that were married for 50 years and then had the same argument going on for 50 years. And as soon as he could get them, each person, to state what was going on for the other person, he would have it resolved in 15 or 20 minutes. Okay? That was difficult to do because people were constantly misstating what was happening. And again, this is probably more than we can get into today. But it's amazing technology. If you're interested in more of this, there are NVC practice groups that meet in cities all over the world. First of all, probably pick up the book when you get home. NVC, Nonviolent Communication, A Language of Life or A Language of Love, I forget, by Dr. Marshall Rosenberg. And then if you're interested more, there's great stuff online. There's actually other teachers who do a much better job teaching it than he ever did. He was an interesting character. He was a bit rough around the edges, PhD, but you know, he was kind of tough. He kind of looked like he was unhappy most of the time, and I think it was difficult for a lot of people to interact with him. And there are other people that have taken up the cause and have done a fantastic job of sharing this. So you might want to look into it. Yeah.
One amazing book is Your Erroneous Zones
Uh-huh.
by Dr. Loren.
Mm-hmm.
He kind of covers it as well. It's an awesome book. Changed my life.
What was it? What was
It's
the
called
book?
Your Erroneous Zones by Wayne Dyer. Any other questions about NVC or anything we have or haven't talked about here?
It's interesting that I was brought up that you don't raise your voice ever, and I suppose from what you're saying that I live my life in a state of suppression.
Well, I mean, I don't know, maybe.
But I still think when I see somebody else being angry, I really dislike it intensely if somebody's angry in front of me, because it feels as if they've lost control. But then I guess control's a bad thing as well.
Well, I mean, I think unfortunately what happens often is people are suppressing, and that's a form of control, but it's a control that doesn't allow them to actually experience the emotion. See, the key is, until we can experience the emotion completely, we can't let it go. It's going to be there.
But why should anything make you angry? If you can dislike it for some reason, but why?
Have you never been angry?
I can't remember being angry.
Okay.
Oh,
I mean, I've certainly been angry. You know, I think
amazing.
it might be fair to say that, although I dislike using the word should, that perhaps nothing should make you angry, but stuff does make most of us angry. And so if you're angry, what's honest is to be transparent about that. Ideally what happens is, as we become more and more conscious, we become less and less angry. In fact, I think it's true is that as our bodies become cleaner, we become less angry. You know, the original Olympians in ancient Greece, the athletes ate mostly fruit and had these incredible physiques and amazing athletic performance. The Greek government fed the soldiers meat. Why?
Hormones. Makes them angry.
That's correct, because eating meat makes people more aggressive.
That's
Okay.
why I used to be pissed off. No, I'm just kidding.
So,
That makes sense, though.
well, and I don't know if this will help you, but it's better to be pissed off than to be pissed on. So, you know, it's partly how clean your body is, you know, where your vibration is. And the vibration, you know, as your body gets cleaner and your vibration shifts, I believe we become more conscious. That's what happens. You know, what is spirituality? What is that? What does it mean? It's one of those things people talk about without really having a definition for it. What is it?
It's going from compulsiveness to consciousness.
Going from compulsiveness to consciousness, okay?
One of my mentors told me technically it's the study of spirits, whether it be your spirit, my spirit, the earth spirit,
Okay,
etc.
But unfortunately, when we use the word spirit to define spirituality, it doesn't really give us a lot of insight.
It doesn't, but technically that's the definition.
Fair enough. But let's look for definitions that actually help us understand what it is. Anybody have any other suggestions?
Awareness of self.
Okay, how about connection with everything?
Right, all of self, right.
Right. So when we're vibrating with the same frequency as the rest of nature, we feel more connected to everything and everyone. Okay? When we're not vibrating at that frequency, we tend to feel isolated and alone and angry and sad, and all these other negative emotions come up. Can those emotions come up even when you're balanced and clean? Of course. Of course. But they're far less likely to.